A lot of people have been reaching out, trying to understand what I posted the other day on social media. I was out consulting one of my clients, and we were designing a game plan basically for his investments. He's already doing some real estate investments. He was looking to consolidate and asking my opinion or my professional recommendation on how we should go about it. So we went through a couple of simulations, but this is one of them. This is just one of the simulations we went through, and I was trying to help him understand how he can scale or how he is gonna have to scale. So we went through a couple of simulations, but this is one of them. I took a picture of this, I posted it online, and I've had a couple of people, about 10 to about 15 people, reach out to me trying to understand what all of this is. All right, so I decided to make a video and try to break down what all of this is, because at the end of the day, it's the implementation that counts. This is the idea. The idea is up here, is the actualization, the implementation, the physical representation of what this is that actually matters, right? That carries weight. So what this is for most people, I talk to a lot of people, and almost everyone wants to go into real estate. Almost everyone has the aspirations. If they're not doing it right now, they're planning on doing it sometime in the future, of going into real estate, buying rental properties or owning multiple properties, which is amazing. It sounds fancy and sounds sophisticated when you just think about it, all right? But there's a lot of mechanics that that's in the back end. And even though real estate is one of the best investments, so to speak, out there, reliable, first of all, secure comparatively compared to other kinds of investments. Even though real estate can be a cash cow if you do it right, and if you scale to a reasonable number, it can be something that is sustainable and could transfer to generations if you set it up correctly. All right. So we're kind of walking through all of that simulation and how that was going to look like. So this individual already has a couple of real estate, I think three rental properties, if I'm not mistaken. And we're just going through, everything he's done so far and where he's trying to go. All right. So what this is basically, this is for a small someone looking at maybe 4 rental properties. Now, one property could be an apartment complex. One property could be a fourplex. One property could be a single family home. One property could be a townhome. All right. So this right here should represent any of those. So it doesn't matter if you just see one representation could mean an apartment complex. This could mean a fourplex or a fiveplex or a single family home or a townhome. Doesn't matter, right? So what this is, a holding company basically manages other subsidiaries. A holding company's responsibility is to manage subsidiary companies. So that could be a corporation or an LLC, and that's its job, is just to manage these other subsidiaries. All right. Now, when you start out in real estate, if you start like I did, which was buy a rental property, buy a primary residence, then over time transition to another property and then rent out the first one, live in the second one for a while, then rent it out and move into the third one, which is the traditional way to do it, especially if you don't have enough cash to spring right into rental properties or into business properties. That is the traditional way most people want to do it. Now, that could work if you know that it is your intended, if it's your intended business plan, then you can do it right from the start. A lot of people get it wrong from the start. And what I mean is, from the very first property, they already get it wrong. Because what I notice a lot of people doing is their first property is way too expensive. They buy a home they want to live in for 20 years or for 30 years or for the rest of their lives. And then down the line, 2-3 years from now, they figure out, I could actually rent this out and move into a new property, but it's too expensive. It's too expensive to make sense why you would rent it out. Probably it's a $600,000 house, for example, or a $500,000 house. Could be a $300,000 or $400,000 house, but guess what? The what you paid for it doesn't justify why you should rent it out. Or no one, or very few people would rent it out at what your mortgage is to actually make sense. So for example, if you're paying about $4,000 if your mortgage is $4,000. Now, to find someone to pay you rent at $4,000 is almost impossible. I'm not saying there are people that exist that would pay $4,000 for rent, but I'm saying it's almost impossible. All right, but your mortgage is $4,000, and you don't want to rent out the house for $4,000. Then you're operating at a negative, in my opinion. Anyway, if you're thinking of cash flow. So if you bought the house for that much and you're renting it for $4,000 or more, it's harder to rent it out. So you've already, even though you have the plan of becoming a real estate investor sometime in the future, your start is already at a negative because you wouldn't be able to do that. And so buying your second property will be more expensive because you may not have to come up with a whole lot of money, which is 20%, typically 20-25% to go buy a business property. So if you're going to start, if you're starting with the end in mind, right, which is a good thing to have, think of your next 5 moves. So if you're starting with the end in mind, I'm buying my first property, but my intention down the line is to someday own a couple of properties. And I want to build it this way, the conservative way of buying one, then transitioning to the next one, buy another another primary residence, and then transition. So you pay less in terms of down payment. So you have to start correctly. So back to this. That was a sidebar. So back to this. The reason you want to structure, or you may consider structuring, I'm not saying this is the only way you could structure your real estate investments, but one of the reasons you may structure it this way is because you want each property to be managed by a separate entity, a separate legal entity, which could be an LLC. All right. So we're saying this property right here, this first property, which could be a fourplex, it could be a fourplex, could be an apartment complex, could be a townhome. This property is managed by this LLC. Then the second property is managed by another LLC. So you're creating separate LLCs to manage all these individual properties. And I'm going to explain why you want to do it this way. So each property here in this represented 4 different properties are managed by 4 different LLCs. If it was 3, if it was 10, we're looking at 10 different LLCs. Now that could be hectic, all right? But I'm going to explain why you want to do it that way. Sometime there is another, okay, I'm not going to dive into that. There is way more that I could share, but let's stick to this. The reason you want to do it this way, one of the main reasons people do it this way is because you want to avoid liability. Liability because if you have a couple of tenants here, let's say you have one tenant, let's just make it simple. Let's say you have this one single family home, you want to have one tenant. This tenant someday slips and falls. Maybe it snowed or maybe it rained. Maybe something happened in the property, all right? They injure themselves. And these days you can be sued for literally anything. So let's say this tenant in this home sues you. You are the individual. You are right there, all right? You are right there. You own this. So all of this is yours. You own the holding company. That holding company now owns all these LLCs. So if this tenant here sues this LLC, because remember, you don't own it directly. So even though you may be the one managing it, and we're going to talk about management properties or management LLC, even though you may be the one managing it, but they are not suing you directly because you have separated yourself from the property. The property now belongs to LLC number 1, LLC number 2, LLC number 3, LLC number 4. This LLC has a name, whatever LLC you want to give, whatever name you want to give it. So this LLC owns that property. If a tenant sues this LLC, the liability remains with this LLC. The reason you want to do this, you don't want to be the one who owns the property directly. Because what happens? If they sue you, if this tenant sues you here, then every single thing in your portfolio is exposed. Because now the courts can go after your actual net worth, right? If you owned other businesses, if you had other investments, those could be affected just because you exposed yourself legally, right? So you want to limit liability. That is, in my opinion, the first reason why most people would structure their investments this way. You want to shield yourself from the LLC. So there is no way this property links directly back to you. For them to get to you, they have to go through this LLC, and this LLC is independent of this one. So if something happened here, the liability remains right here. It doesn't transition. If something happened here, the same thing happened here. I think we get the gist, all right? And then you could create a separate LLC that manages all these properties. You create a separate management LLC that manages all this property. This one now could be, this way you could have your handyman, you could have marketers, you could have people that are filling up your properties, all right, cleaning the property, maintaining it, all of that, all right. You could have a separate LLC in charge of doing all of this, all right. Then I just added, we're discussing, of course, going through his plan. We talked about consulting, we talked about investment. You like have a separate LLC whose job is primarily to search for investments or search for investors. So you can search for other investors and search for investment properties, all right? So that could be the job of another LLC. So that is kind of the structure. Another way or another reason you may want to structure your business this way is because you want to be able to track performance. You want to be able to track performance. You want to know which of your properties is performing the best. Now, if you have two properties in one LLC, yes, you could go through bookkeeping and find out which LLC is performing better, which property is performing better. You could go through that. But when you have 2, 3, 4, 10 properties in one LLC, now it becomes a headache to track which one is performing best. All right, it's hard to track. When you do it this way, you can either look at the books and be like, you know what, this property is doing great. This one is doing great. This one not so much. This one not so much. Maybe because of the neighborhood. Maybe because of other factors, all right? This one is not performing. So if you're thinking of selling one of your properties, you can easily tell which one to sell. So this one is gone because it's causing you the most headache. And these ones are producing, so you can keep them, all right? So it's easy to track, in my opinion. And then we talked on funding. We talked on if you're thinking of getting into the business of real estate, all right? Real estate investing specifically. You got one of the main things you're gonna have to figure out or deal with is funding. Where do you get the money to actually start? So we talked about some possibilities. Crowdfunding here is where you bring a group of people with a shared vision and idea to fund that plan. So you're thinking, okay, we want to start buying real estate properties, we want to start investing in real estate. We have 10, 15, 20, 30 people. How about we contribute $1,000, $10,000 each so we can have enough money to fund it? So you may be the person running this crowdfunding. I'm going to be the person running, buying the properties, managing, blah, 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 blah. But I need all of you to come in and contribute, chip in, or invest into the venture. Crowdfunding. Loan, of course, right? It's almost impossible to buy a property these days without getting kind of a loan from bank. There are different types of loans. I'm not going to get into that. Savings. You may have some money in your savings account, right? You want to go do your down payment. You may have some money in your savings account you could use for that, all right? Money you've been putting aside for a while, maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 years, who knows? But you use money from your savings, all right? Cash flow. Cash flow here would typically come from a business or from a venture, something that is constantly giving you money. All right, that is cash flow there. Life insurance. You could use your life insurance policy as a collateral to buy your real estate properties, or you could use you could use the cash value in your life insurance. That is, if you have the right type of life insurance, of course, to fund your real estate investments. All right, these are different ways you could go about it. All right, talk to someone who understands how this could be done to help you out. Business. Your business is making enough money to at least fund your real estate investments. And of course, assets. Assets. You can use assets. That is, if you understand, first of all, what an asset is. And if you have enough of them to liquidate and fund your investments. Now, personally, I've been able to use loans, savings, life insurance, and assets to buy my own properties. My very first building, I had to use my savings because I saved money for a couple of years when I started working in IT. Saved money for a couple of months, invested in my first property. I had to borrow money from the bank. I had to borrow money from the bank to buy my property, of course. My second property, I had to use money from my asset. All right? And in this case, my asset was my car. I know a car is considered a liability. It could be an asset if you know how to use it. I had bought this car back in 2020. I was driving the car, it was great. When I decided I wanted to buy my second property, I didn't have enough money in the bank, in the savings, but the bank needed me to come up with a percentage. It needed me to come up with 5% down payment. I didn't have the money. So what happened? I had to go sell my car. So I used my car as an asset, right? I went on Facebook, I bought a cheap rundown car for about $600 that I drove for about 8 months. All right. And then I sold the car that I had. I sold the Ford that I was driving. I sold it and used the money to invest in my property. So my second property came, I used that. Life insurance, definitely. Cash value in my life insurance. I've used a portion of my life insurance to invest in real estate as well. So it all comes down to how you want to go about it. But again, there are a lot of details on here. This is just highlight this because I had a lot of people asking me questions on how they can go about this. A lot of people were mainly concerned on how they can use life insurance to fund or start their real estate investments. And I teach extensively on how life insurance could be utilized for that purpose. So if you found any value on this video, give it a thumbs up, share it, like it, subscribe to the channel, and see you again on the next one. Ciao.